So the big question is now a bad time to buy a Mac? And I'm not just talking about like a 21.5 inch 4K iMac that hasn't been updated since 2019. I'm talking about any Mac, including the Apple Silicon M1 Macs. Is now a bad time? Well, today we're going to talk about it. So this was a bit of an impromptu video, and in fact, you might notice that this is the first quote-unquote normal video that I'm filming in the new studio space, so I'm quite interested to hear what you guys think about it. This is where I'll be shooting a lot of videos right in this space, so let me know what you think about this shot. Do you like it? I know this light is flickering a little bit. I'm working on that, so stay tuned. You don't need to comment about the flickering light. I know, and I'm working on it. So let's dig into this, and of course, if you want to continue to see my coverage as all of these new Apple Silicon products unfold, make sure to get subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss an upload. So the reason I decided to make this video was because of an article that was posted today on Mac Rumors, specifically their buyer's guide. Now, if you don't know the Mac Rumors buyer's guide, I would definitely check it out if you're interested in buying any new Apple product. Basically what they do is they gather all the leaks and rumors that are being reported on, as well as look at previous release schedules to determine whether or not it is, quote, safe to buy any given Apple product at that moment. And the article that they released today was pretty clear. Buyer's guide, don't buy a MacBook Pro now. That's very cut and dry. So I figured we'd break it down, talk about what this is essentially saying, and there are a few things that I do want to add to the coverage that's going on here. So the first reason that I decided to make a video was that this article really nicely summarizes exactly what we are expecting. So let's just go through the list. A new 14-inch model to replace the current 13-inch model with reduced bezels, a new flatter design similar to the iPhone 12, efficient, powerful, next-generation Apple Silicon chips with up to 16 performance cores, which is bonkers. We're also potentially looking at a custom Apple Silicon GPU, an updated thermal design for the 14-inch model, which is apparently going to be using a similar design to the current 16-inch MacBook Pro. We're looking at better displays, additional ports, including an SD card reader. Please bring it back. We're also then looking at MagSafe and no touch bar. So we've talked about a lot of these things in a recent video. I can't remember when I made it. It was like 2 weeks ago or something like that. I don't remember. But basically, this isn't all new. What is new is perhaps timing, the way we want to think about it with the existing Apple Silicon Macs. So we're not going to be doing a ton of coverage of the leaks and rumors, but mainly about whether or not you should buy a MacBook Pro right now. So the thing that I think is very interesting about this particular article is the way that they characterize the new 14-inch model as replacing the 13-inch and adopting a similar cooling system to the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which, by the way, we are also expecting to get replaced. So on face value, that seems to suggest that this new 14-inch MacBook Pro, which we've all been hoping for since November of 2019, is going to replace all of the 13-inch MacBook Pros, including the M1. However, I don't think that's the case. Now, this is not based on a leak. Keep in mind, I'm not an Apple leaker. I'm an analyst, and this is based purely off of the way that Apple has tended to do business over the past really 10 years or so. So basically, how I see this playing out is not that Apple would completely get rid of the 13-inch MacBook Pro and then introduce a new 14-inch model. At least at first, what I think they are more likely to do is replace the 4 Thunderbolt port Intel model with a 14-inch MacBook Pro and leave the M1 in place. Now, I mentioned that in a previous video, but since that video, there have been some new developments. For example, apparently there is a new MacBook Air in the works with similar changes. Now, that one is actually a little bit more complex and sort of complicates the way that we have to think about that. Now, keep in mind, all of this is speculation. This is based on what Apple has done in the past, and That's not necessarily an indicator of what they're going to do in the future. But the way that Apple has historically operated, both with the MacBook Air and especially with the MacBook Pro, is when a new generation comes out, it is a premium, right? You look back at 2016, you look at 2012. Both times, the previous models stuck around at their usual price points and the new one came out on top. So for example, the 2016 MacBook Pro, the Function Keys 13-inch model, was $1499, and the early 2015 Retina model of the previous generation stuck around for a couple of months until it too got phased out in 2017. You can go even further back and look at the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro that came out in late 2012. The unibody, the mid-2012 unibody MacBook Pro stuck around until 2016, completely unchanged, with a 3rd-gen Core i5, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and a 500 gigabyte hard drive for $1099. That stayed for 4 years. So my point is, when you see these rumors about a new 14-inch MacBook Pro, and now you're all of a sudden, you're like, ooh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't buy the M1 because, let's face it, it's the previous generation from a design standpoint, and this new model seems to have a lot going for it. Getting back MagSafe, getting back some ports, getting rid of the touch bar, bigger, brighter displays, a new design. That's a lot of upgrades. However, I think it would be a decently safe bet that this new 14-inch model will not replace the M1, and that it will in fact replace the 4 Thunderbolt port model, which starts at $1,800. Now that could be a very big factor for you, because if you're looking at the base model M1 MacBook Pro and you're saying, all right, well maybe I'll hold out and I'll wait for the 14-inch, you might be very disappointed when that model comes out and is well out of your price range by $500. Alternatively, let's say you're looking at the M1 MacBook Pro and you feel like speccing it out, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage. All of a sudden, you're getting close to $2,000. So if you're getting that high in price, maybe it is worth waiting. Maybe you do want the extra features of a new generation of MacBook Pro that could come out, could be launched in WWDC for all we know. That's 5 months from now. That's not a particularly long time. And now for the MacBook Air, we don't have as much information on that yet. Apparently there is going to be a similarly redesigned MacBook Air, which makes sense. Usually the MacBook Air is on a later time frame in terms of adopting a new design. I mean, you look at the current MacBook Air, when it got the butterfly keyboard design language, it got that in 2018, when the MacBook Pro got it in 2016. So it's possible that a redesigned MacBook Air won't hit until next year, at which point you're like, okay, well, the M1 is gonna do fine. Now, obviously, everything that I've been saying so far applies to the 13-inch MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro. If you're looking at a 16-inch MacBook Pro, if you've got a 16-inch MacBook Pro tab open, close the tab. Do not buy a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That is one area where I will make no concessions, all right? We are at the point where the 16-inch MacBook Pro is, in all essence, gonna be dead, okay? So it came out in November 2019, and 2020, it did not receive an update. You need to understand how big of a deal that is. The 15, now 16-inch MacBook Pro has never not received an update. The MacBook Pro has existed since 2006, and it has been updated at least once a year that entire time until 2020. If that is not a huge red flag to you that the 16-inch is going to be replaced, then I don't know how to help you. Okay, it's pretty obvious that that's going to be replaced with a new generation, with Apple Silicon, most likely with the aforementioned dedicated GPU, which is really exciting because that's not something that we really know anything about yet, apart from the fact that it's supposedly, 16 or 32 cores. I mean, the M1 GPU is no slouch, and we're basically talking about quadrupling the cores, so what does that tell you? So, TLDR, should you or should you not buy a MacBook Pro right now? Well, if you're looking at the base model 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, or the base model M1 MacBook Air, or the base model Mac Mini, then you're probably fine. I don't foresee those getting replaced in the next 8 or 9 months. It might not be until this A15 generation comes out later in the year, and then those will get some sort of an internal upgrade. But obviously, I don't think that's worth waiting for, because that's, 15, 20% internal performance gains. No big deal. That stuff happens all the time. In terms of actually getting a new generation of MacBook Pro, if you're one of those people who's sitting there looking at the M1 going, oh, I wish it had 32 gigabytes of RAM. Ooh, I wish it could output to multiple monitors. Ooh, I wish it was just a little bit more powerful with 2 cooling fans. Then you are the target audience for this new generation, and you need to wait. The M1 was not designed to replace your iMac Pro. Those replacements are still yet to come. They're on the way. The M1 was not the end, it was just the beginning. So if you think that the M1 was a limitation for what you want, you need to wait. So it's a very exciting time right now. Apple Silicon is here, more is on the way, and I'm gonna be covering all of it. So make sure you're subscribed. I've got a lot of really fun projects on the way, not just talking about Apple Silicon here, folks. I've got some fun stuff planned. So you're gonna wanna be subscribed, turn on notifications, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Luke Miani, and let me know your take on all of this in the comments below. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.